Hi, English 131 students. This is our first discussion of essay number 6, which is going to be called a critical summary essay, sometimes called an analytical summary, but I call it a critical summary. I'll explain why. I posted for you the assignment sheet a few minutes ago, and this is just sort of an introductory discussion of that. The next video I'm going to record for you will be some kind of a writing workshop on the essays that you just submitted to me. And then after that, we will do an exercise on summary. And then I will give you the article that you're going to do your critical summary on. All right, so that's a lot of information I'm dumping on you. But for now, you can look over the critical summary assignment sheet, and I'm going to discuss that project a little bit here for a little while. I should also, there's something else I'm going to tell you, but I'll tell you in an email. It's not news about the class, but news about potentially some money for you. All right. So keep your eye out for an email I'm going to be sending you about that. Okay, so first of all, this analytical summary, it's a department requirement, English department requirement, actually a college requirement. Here I said I was going to call it the critical summary, and I'm writing down analytical summary. It's a requirement by the college that we do this because it's a kind of exercise that's common in writing classes in college. It's common in lots of classes. You might be asked to write a critical summary, and if you do, well, now you'll know how to do it. It's also something that the college has needed to do to make sure that this course includes some formal training in what we call critical thinking. That's a term you've heard teachers talk about before, and you've heard me talk about it before, but we're going to talk about it again. Critical thinking. What we mean by critical thinking, or I guess, if you talk to 8 teachers about what they mean by critical thinking, you'll probably get 7 or 8 different ideas. But how I often define it is like this: evaluative thinking. This may not be all of what critical thinking is, but it captures a lot of it. By evaluative thinking, what I mean is thinking that evaluates, right? Critical thinking, a person who's a critical thinker doesn't just accept any information into their storehouse between your ears. There's a lot of information in the world, and when it's coming at you, you need to evaluate it. You need to think of it kind of on a scale from high to low value, right? That's the root word there, value. How valuable is this information? Is it good information or not, right? That's what I think a critical thinker does. And the way that you evaluate the quality of something, kind of like, I guess I think of it as the goal is to be skeptical, like a scientist. a lot of how information is handled in academia is as a scientist would handle information, right? So scientists are trained to be skeptical. Sometimes people think to be skeptical means to not believe anything, but what it means is to be reluctant to believe something until there's adequate evidence, adequate proof, right? So scientists, they're very cautious thinkers. They don't believe something until there's enough evidence that they kind of feel like they need to believe it, right? That way they keep nonsense out of their heads, right? And they can feel more confident that what they believe is actually true, right? So scientists require, in order to believe something, they require proof, evidence. I guess the difference between proof and evidence is that evidence is just something that would support a particular view. Proof is like enough evidence that you're convinced, right? A convincing amount of evidence. So scientists require proof, and they also require consistency with other known information, right? So in other words, when they're given some information, they think, is there evidence for it? And how does it fit in with what I already know to be true? If it doesn't fit in with what I know to be true, I'm still going to be skeptical of it until I can figure out how it fits in with everything else. Right? So I think this really kind of gets at the heart of what critical thinking is, right? Sometimes a critical summary is called an analytical summary, as I said. And that's because a critical summary involves analysis. Right? Analysis, to analyze something, is how I want to do this. Breaking down into breaking something down into its parts. Right? That's what it means to analyze something. If the police pull you over and they give you a breathalyzer, what that will do is it will analyze or break down into its parts, the chemicals that are coming out of your breath. And if they find a bag of white powder in your glove compartment, they'll take that to the lab and analyze it. They'll find out what chemicals it's made of, and then they know what the thing is. If you take your car to a mechanic because it's got a problem, which we did a couple weeks ago, they hooked it up to a computer that analyzed the problem. What that means is the computer goes through the various systems of the car and checks to see if they're functioning properly. Right? So analysis is breaking something down into its parts so that you understand how all the parts fit together and how they function, and that allows you to understand the whole thing better. Right? What does that have to do with writing? Well, in this case, I think an analytical summary. I'm going to be giving you an article that you're going to summarize and analyze and critique. That's the critical part, right? The judge part. Um, and what we mean by critique, think of how critics work, right? Movie critics, restaurant critics, book critics. What they do is they write their critiques or their reviews, um, and what they do is, I mean, they're supposed to, I've erased it now, but they're supposed to indicate what's the quality of this movie: high quality, low quality. The restaurant, good, bad, right? Where is it on that scale? Well, in order to do that, they don't just say, oh, this is a good movie or this is a bad restaurant. Um, they analyze the experience, right? How is the acting? How is the story? How is the music, etc. Or think of a restaurant. Typically, the restaurant experience is broken down into three components in a review. They'll talk about the food, the atmosphere, and the service, right? And then each of those gets broken down into its parts, right? The food, obviously, there are all these different dishes that they can talk about, and what kinds of food do they have? Well, they only have pub food, or the main courses are small, but the appetizers are big or whatever. For service, it would involve how fast it is, how polite it is, how accurate it is. Atmosphere would include what they have hanging on the walls, how loud it is, how crowded, cold, warm, you know, etc. So you break things down to its parts, and you think about each of the parts, and then you can make an overall judgment more accurately instead of just taking the whole impression of something, right? So this is what we're going to be doing with this article that I'm going to give you. We'll do that, right? I'm not just going to have you do it on your own. We're going to discuss this article up and down and back and forth, so you'll have a lot of ideas about it. We're going to analyze it a lot, and then you're going to write your paper. Right? You'll see from the assignment sheet that the first paragraph of an analytical summary is the summary part. And I believe you know what we mean by summary. A summary is not just putting something into your own words, but condensing it down, right? So you can summarize a paragraph in a single sentence. You could summarize a chapter in a book in a single sentence. You could summarize a whole book in a single sentence. Summary is taking something big and condensing it down. How do you do that? Well, you do that by identifying what the main idea or main ideas are in something, and then you paraphrase it, right? So we've talked before about paraphrasing. Critical summary, we're talking now just about summary, right? So summary is, I would say, a paraphrase of the main ideas in a text. Right? So the summary really is the easiest, most straightforward part of this exercise, this essay that you're going to write. The summary, by the way, is let's say, I'm going to say intro, but let's just say the opening paragraph. This is a challenging essay. Opening paragraph is a summary. In other words, a paraphrase of the main ideas in the text. This is a challenging essay, which is why it's the second to last essay of the semester. But one piece of good news is that the opening paragraph, the introductory paragraph, which is often very hard for people to write, in this case won't be so hard. It's very straightforward. You don't have to think of anything clever. You just got to write a summary, a paragraph summary of the article. Right? In your opening sentence, you should include the title and the author of the thing that you're going to be critiquing. Author's name is what I mean by that, right? And then the text's main point or thesis. Okay? That's what the first sentence of your critical summary will be. In his article, blah, 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 Joe Blow argues that, whatever, right? That's your first sentence. The rest of the paragraph is then going to be other, in other words, meaning supporting main ideas. These are still main ideas, but not the main idea. Okay. Regardless of whether the author has a stated thesis in his or her paper or not, you can write one. You can, even if it's just kind of implied. Okay. All right. So a summary, I don't know. I think of it as a pretty simple process, but sometimes students seem to make it more difficult than it needs to be. A summary really, in a way, is kind of it's a process of elimination. You're deciding what not to include, in other words. You got a book, you've got an article, you got whatever it is you're going to be summarizing. You need to decide which things not to include, and then what's left is your summary, right? You're going to be stripping out a lot of details, even though those details are important and they may be interesting. When you're thinking of summarizing, that's an N there, think of an outline. I believe that you know how to do an outline. We haven't formally studied that, but, an outline usually has, the main point, the thesis kind of written out, and then it's got several parts, sections. If it's a brief essay like yours, it might have 4 body paragraphs or 3 body paragraphs or 2 or something like that. And then each of those, of course, has its own supporting points. Right? And potentially each of those can have its supporting points, and so on and so forth, right? So an outline, if you're outlining a book, it could end up being very, very, um, extensive, very detailed, right? But when you're doing a summary, and this is my point, when you're doing a summary, as interesting and important as all the supporting details are, all you're going to do is talk about the main ideas, right? So you're going to try to identify what are the main ideas in this paper or this book or whatever, and strip out all the details and just leave the big picture kind of view of it like this behind. Okay, when you are writing your critical summary, usually when you're given something to write a critical summary or an analytical summary, the instructor is going to give you something that's challenging and something that's worth wrestling with. And so you want to begin by making sure you understand what's going on in the reading. You're going to be doing an analytical summary, a detailed critique of it. You want to make sure that you understand what's going on, right? So read the article and mark any kind of unfamiliar vocabulary you might find. Of course, you should look up words that you don't know, and you should even look up ones that you think, I kind of know what that is. Well, if you can't write a paraphrase, if you can't come up with a word or phrase that you think pretty accurately substitutes for it, that's often a sign that you should look it up. Okay. The summary that you're going to write is the basis for your essay. So you want to make sure that you're beginning on a solid foundation. You want to begin by making sure you understand the article that you're going to be writing about as thoroughly as possible. Right? That's you need to do that in order to be able to go into a good analysis and critique. All right. So when you're going to paraphrase something, it doesn't usually work well to, we've talked about this before, to kind of try to go through the existing sentence, the author's original sentence, word for word, and try to substitute, another word for each of the words in the order that they appear. It's better to kind of read the sentence, get the concept in your head, kind of get it up in your head, put the original aside, and then write something fresh, where you're trying to use your own grammar, your own sentence, to make something that's original. Then what you do, of course, is you bring back the original and kind of compare the two and see if anything is inaccurate or too close. Right? So, I have, should I put that down? Why don't I? To paraphrase. This is something that's important, and students often don't do this, so I'm going to emphasize it. To paraphrase, read the passage, whatever it is, usually it's just a sentence, right? Read the passage, put the original aside, write a fresh version, right? Try to come up with your own fresh version not imitating anything about the original, and then compare with original for any language that's still word for word. Remember this word verbatim, which means word for word, exact language. If you're writing a paraphrase, you don't want to have the author's exact language, because then that's not a paraphrase. That's a quote. Or if you don't put quotation marks, that's plagiarism. Right? Look for verbatim language and inaccuracies. Right? Did you get it? Did you get it right? If not, well, fine tune it so that those inaccuracies are, so you eliminate inaccuracies so the thing actually reflects what it's supposed to be written about. Okay, so that's it. I will next week be posting an exercise and a video about summary. Okay. Some of you have not yet given me your persuasive papers, the distracted driving paper. If you can get it to me soon, please do. I'm worrying that some people are not planning to finish the course, and I guess maybe it's not worth my saying this in a YouTube video, because only the people who are planning to finish the course are probably watching. Those of you who are finishing the course, I'm glad, right? Let me know if there's anything I can do to help you finish the class, because it's probably challenging for a lot of you to be doing this online. So I'm glad you're still with me. Okay, I will be grading the papers that I got and returning them by email within a couple of days, maybe even tomorrow. All right, take care. Bye.